Self-loathing writer who is in a deep spiral trying to create something good is kind of my jam, and this fits that to a T. The fact that it's also got Nicolas Cage in it, someone I also love, and it's Charlie Kaufman, who I love. Yeah, there's a lot of boxes ticked on this one.
I appreciated it the longer I stayed with it, because you kind of, all the pieces were clicking into place, and it was just really satisfying that way.
I love everything about this movie. like genuinely, I will give it exactly what I gave it in Letterboxd. It's 5. I love this movie.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Flixwatcher podcast. Today I'm joined by Paul.
Hi there.
Emma.
Hi.
Helen.
Hello.
And we're going super nuts with Charlie Kaufman in Adaptation.
Thank you as always to the mighty people for the mighty tunes, and thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello film fans, thanks for listening today. Joining us remotely, we have Paul and Emma. If you could please say hello and tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm part of the Yearbook Committee podcast. I do other things as well. So I stream on Twitch and I write a lot of horror nonsense. The Yearbook Committee podcast, a podcast all about teen movies, where every episode we pick 3 films and a theme, and we see if those films fit that theme. And most of the time it's us making Buffy references and being excited that Reese Witherspoon comes back all the time.
What, so she comes back, she's in Election? I'm trying.
Oh, we've had her a ton.
Yeah, she's come back.
I mean,
a
we
few times.
haven't. It would be great if she came on the podcast.
Is Legally Blonde it's just high school, isn't it?
Yeah, we occasionally venture into college movies, but it's mostly high school. So we haven't done Cruel Intentions yet, but we've had
of course.
Fear. That was fun as well.
Yeah, Fear, SFW, Election.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's more to come.
Pleasantville.
Yeah, Pleasantville.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people, kind of the same people, crop up in time and time. Like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, for example, he's in a few of these. So are you allowed to repeat the same film? Because I've been listening to your show and I can't see any repeats in there. Whether it would be like there'll be clear ones where you could use in the same category time and time again. Is that one of the rules you stipulate?
We've never done a repeat, mostly because there are so many films on the list. I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
Do you got like kind of like a series of Venn diagrams where you've got all of like the crossovers? Because surely there must be like films where you're like, well, could we do it under this episode or that episode? Like, how does it get?
Oh, we have a spreadsheet.
How do you make the decisions? A spreadsheet, yes. Yes.
Everyone has a little sort of theme or topic, and we've got 3 films lined up for each of them. Then we've just got a section afterwards of like alternate choices.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's maybe just 1, and sometimes it's about 5. And if there's enough, then we'll go, you know what, this is a 2-parter or a 3-parter. Yeah.
Or more.
Oh, yeah.
We're generally quite in sync, so most of the time we can usually agree quite quickly, what film fits under what theme. But we've had an occasional, it's not even a full argument, it's usually we both just are sort of like, I don't know, and then we end up with 3 episodes.
Well, give everyone
extra.
an example of a theme and the films that came with that theme.
One of my favourites is the Mean-a-thon. So we did The Mean Friend. So that was Mean Girls, Heathers and Jawbreaker. And it was one of our first ones, and it's still one of my favourites.
Yeah, that was a good long while ago, because the first effective season, we kind of each episode attached itself to a particular kind of teen trope type character, like the jock, the mean friend, the nerd, all that kind of stuff.
The stoner.
Yeah, exactly.
They were not good films.
Dazed and Confused I still love.
Dazed and Confused, a lot of people really, really love.
Yeah.
I totally get why, but it's just not one I can grab onto, and I don't know why it frustrates me, because I love Linklater and I love all the people in it, but it's just the one that frustratingly I can never have any love for.
I found it a bit all right, saw it. It's fine.
And how do you actually source the films? Because some of them are really quite obscure. There's an Angelina Jolie one which sounded awesome. And I was just like,
Yeah, Foxfire.
yeah,
Oh,
Foxfire.
it's so good, Foxfire.
Yeah.
That was great.
Foxfire's
That's one of our ones that we just wish one day when Netflix would listen to us.
I legit
Put it on there.
I still request that movie on Netflix like every month or so.
Oh, do you
put
do
it
that?
on. Yeah, there's a wee section.
Of course, we know this.
Yeah, there's a wee section. If you go to your settings on Netflix, you can record. It's like you can request like 3 TV series or movies,
Okay.
and I do a bunch of. It's never worked for me once, but one day they'll listen.
One day.
Well, I was surprised today I found out that More Than Colour has been put on Netflix, which is a film that I've heard a gajillion people talk about.
It's
Lynn
one of
Ramsey
my
film.
all-time faves.
I've never seen it. And also, so I want that and Ratcatcher to go on. And well, basically just want all the Lynn Ramsey films on there. I'd love to do like a weekend of her films.
And they're all like 90 minutes long as well, so you can have a lovely time in a very short time.
Yeah.
Well, we're here talking about a film that's a bit longer. It's Adaptation, which is your choice, Paul. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it? And then I'll get a stopwatch out and put a timer on for 60 seconds and tell us the synopsis.
Okay, so I picked this film because this is exactly the type of film that speaks to me in several different types of ways. Like, everyone tends to have a type of story that they just gravitate towards almost regardless of genre. Self-loathing writer who is in a deep spiral trying to create something good is kind of my jam. And this fits that to a T. The fact that it's also got Nicolas Cage in it, someone I also love, and it's Charlie Kaufman, who I love. Yeah, there's a lot of boxes ticked on this one.
And the synopsis starting now.
So Charlie Kaufman is a Hollywood screenwriter with one good movie under his belt and is now struggling to create a second one. The fact that he is an incredibly talented writer, but who is also incredibly self-loathing and anxious about his own talent and the expectation of producing another great hit, leads him to attempt to adapt a book called The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean, which he struggles to adapt because it has no structure, it just has characters. And he struggles with it so much that he eventually writes a script in which the movie is about him adapting the book and struggling with that. So it's a weird Ouroboros tale of him attempting to create something good, failing to do so, but then writing a movie about how he's trying to create something good, but failing to do so. And in doing so, actually creates a movie that's worthwhile.
Excellent. 59 seconds. There's a timer there for people who don't believe we have a timer.
Did you practice this?
No?
It was very good.
Very good.
Very slick.
So, I mean, where do you want to start on it? Because it's, I was going to say let's start with the meta aspects, but it's super meta in many different ways. But the film that successful film that he's written before is being John Malkovich.
Yeah.
And I've seen this once before. I can't remember any of the ties to being John Malkovich. I think I maybe just watched it when I was super tired. But I knew it's by the same kind of team that made being John Malkovich. But I loved all the references that they're in there. Seeing John Cusack just for a glimpse and Catherine Keener in shots, and going back to the like 9 3/4 height, the super short floor, and going behind the scenes and stuff like that. Seeing John Malkovich, all those kind of bits. So that really engaged me this time around. Where you guys with John Malkovich, which is a film we've covered here before, actually.
I mean, I'm trying to remember when I actually saw Being John Malkovich. Neither of the films are ones that I saw in the cinema. They're only ones I came to on DVD later. But Being John Malkovich, being that kind of film, really appealed to me. So it was actually it's a weird. On a certain perspective, it's a sort of conceptual sequel to Being John Malkovich, just on the level it follows this one completely insignificant character from Being John Malkovich, the guy who wrote it. And so you have all of these little moments that return to trying to put him into the place of making a film. This is the world in which he lives and creates and effectively makes his living. But no one respects him. No one really pays attention to him. And that just makes him more and more anxious about it. Yeah, it's a neat, as I say, nice little conceptual sequel to that first one.
Yourself, Emma, you're a fan of Being John Malkovich?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these films I feel like I watched once and went, yes, that was good. And didn't go back to it fully as much as Paul did. So this was actually the first time I'd watched Adaptation. And it's the most Paul film that ever Pauled.
Aww.
No, I did really enjoy it. Like, I did love all the kind of, and I know we'll chat more about the meta stuff, but
Well, let's go
I think-
to where you want to go now with the meta angles, the different aspects of it.
Sure. I mean, I feel like it's a film where I appreciated it the longer I stayed with it. Because you kind of, all the pieces were clicking into place and it was just really satisfying that way. But I will let Paul rant about all the meta because I think that's probably what he's bursting to talk about.
Well, why wouldn't you want to talk about the meta? And how could you avoid the meta? Again, good Lord, where do you actually start in actually trying to put together the weird thing about adaptation is it's effectively a true story. It really, Charlie Kaufman did read The Orchid Thief.
Okay.
And did genuinely try to adapt it because he loved it so much.
So hold on, The Orchid Thief is a real book. I've done zero research on this. Okay.
Yep.
Legit a real book.
It's a real book. Susan Orlean is a real writer, and he just wanted to make a movie of this book, but he wanted to keep the things that he found really, really special about the book. Things about the fascination with the type of character like John Laroche, the one that Chris Cooper plays. And why a writer would fall in with someone like that and be fascinated by him, but also just be fascinated by not just him, but the things he cares passionately about orchids, about nature, about fish. Those are the things he wanted to keep about it. But the fact that there is no story to the book, he really, really struggled with it. And in an act of just absolute lunacy, wrote himself into it. I mean, that's another aspect of the film that we ultimately get is the fact that as he's writing this film, about him trying to write the film, he constantly struggles with the decision to stay true to the book or make it a more quote-unquote Hollywood film by putting in an artificial storyline, like a thriller plot or a romance plot. So he creates a fictitious twin brother, Donald, who effectively becomes kind of an anti-sounding board. That if Donald's saying that's how it should run, that's exactly what we should not do. But then the whole film becomes a process of trying to wonder if that's actually the right way to do it, and eventually giving into it and trying to create the film he really wanted to, whilst creating the film that people want to see. It's kind of a head spinner. I love it. I love it.
I was going to say, there's also the interesting theory that the screenplay that Donald is also writing about the serial killer, who the serial killer is also the cop and the victim and the killer, it's also that Kaufman and Susan, the writer of The Orchid Thief, and Donald are also all the same person. So there's like one kind of like wormhole opens up another wormhole. And you could just go on forever and ever and ever trying to link it all back, but then potentially none of it links back at all. It's just whether you want to kind of look at it in that way as well.
Yeah, I like the theory because it does have this. It does try to have this connective tissue of like this is just the through line of all writers. It's almost like Charlie Kaufman being so wrapped up in his own anxiety of the process, kind of just assumes that all other writers are exactly like that. But also they're not, because they're successful and doing good work and just living their lives. And how can they not be balls of anxiety just like him? So you have this attempt of him to try and make Susan Orlean, his character, more like him. But then you get moments where he goes and actually sees her and meets her. And she's nothing like that. She is just someone who wrote an article, then wrote a book and did a job and moved on. But she
didn't move on though, did she? Well, as written in the film of the screenplay of the thing which may or may not have happened.
Exactly, yeah.
See, I think if you were the real Susan Orlean, you'd have told them to away and get it. I'd have been livid. She's doing this. And she'd been like, no, this is not my book. But at the same time, I think that's what's fun about it.
Yeah, I mean...
It's not the book. It's probably... I've not read it, but it seems like it's absolutely not the book.
I love this concept. I mean, I'm kind of floored that the book exists, which adds orders of magnitudes of meta to already what's going on here. I'm not going to read the book. I'm just going to read a synopsis when we finish. I'm going to tell you that now. Maybe go on Amazon or whatever and get some reviews.
Apparently, it's not going to make a very good film screenplay because there's no narrative to it or anything.
I'm not looking to write a screenplay. I just want to see kind of key points of it. That's kind of blown my mind.
So there's quite a lot of real characters in it who exist, and there's real characters who are playing themselves in it. So obviously, John Malkovich is in there, and John Cusack, and various other people.
Catherine Keener.
And then there's also people playing real characters. So obviously, Meryl Streep is playing Susan and Chris Cooper is playing Laroche. So there's also that as well. But then in a slightly weird twist, one of the main characters, Donald, doesn't exist. So you've got this kind of weird... So even people down to like the exec who keeps saying he'd bang that, he said something like that, doesn't he? That is based on a real exec, but that's not him playing him. He's based on a character. So all the way running through it are real people playing either a version of themselves or real people portrayed by actors or someone who doesn't exist but is played in a way that could be real.
I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I'm sure it makes sense.
I know it makes exact, and I think that's what's enjoyable about it, is that there's kind of enough suspension of disbelief to make you go, wait, does he have a brother?
There's a brilliant line in it quite early on, Tilda Swinton's character, where she says, I guess I'm not entirely sure what that means. And I kind of, when I watched this again, I was like, this is the film. This is, I am that in there. And then there's even more weird things. So like the dinner party guests, like Curtis Hanson and David O. Russell are both directors and they're both there as guests. And then obviously Spike Jonze made a film with David O. Russell. So there's even more like real people, but them playing fictional characters. So there's all this kind of like weird world of film and literature and reality all blended.
I think this must have been an absolute... I don't know how... Well, they've obviously pitched it and got it off the back of being John Malkovich, but it takes a certain amount of chutzpah to put this film together and make it successful, make it... I'm not sure if it's coherent, but make it thought-provoking. But I think a lot of it ties together with... because of Nicolas Cage, and he is a very Marmite actor. Not necessarily because people like him or don't like him. In some films, he's atrocious. In some films, he's absolutely stellar. And I think this is one of his most endearing films. Him and Donald, but I think this is one of the best twin performances I've seen in films. Yeah. I can't think of one better, both in kind of how seamless it is, but just how the interaction goes between them and how straight away you can tell, oh, that's Donald, and that's Charles. And this is all down to Nicolas Cage, and you just kind of think, dude, can you just sort yourself out?
where was this all of these years?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great Joe performance. What I really enjoy is that it doesn't actually lead itself to what would be really, really easy to do of make Charlie Kaufman the character, like, you know, obsessive sad sack writer, and make Donald Kaufman really slick, really cool, just like everyone's friend and that. You can totally see that they are very similar, that they would be twins. There's kind of a very fine line that separates them, but there is still that really good distinction between what they are like. You can easily tell them apart, even though they are so close as to be almost the same person at times. It's great.
Because it's not Donald's overconfidence, it's his lack of saying, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, he has no self-consciousness at all.
Yeah. It's not confidence.
Apparently it was originally going to be Tom Hanks, so it could have been an entirely different kind of film altogether. And if you're looking for like...
Playing both characters.
Yeah, so he was originally cast. If you're looking for like another great twin performance, Jeremy Irons in Dead Ringers is pretty good up there. It's kind of interesting, like Nicolas Cage apparently decided to just kind of only sort of respond to what Spike Jonze said and completely didn't do anything that he'd ever done ever before. And obviously, you know, gave this performance and was nominated for an Oscar. And people who claim they don't like Nicolas Cage films, when you say, but even the adaptation, and they'll go, oh, actually, yeah, I kind of like that. It's so interesting, is it? Because you're like, well, if you can do that once, then why wouldn't you kind of want to go back there or kind of revisit that in a different way, but a more interesting way?
I feel like that's almost the trick, though. Like, he can't be that good all the time. He has to trick you into wanting to go see the film, to go, maybe it'll be good this time.
Yeah.
It's and like then every now and then you get a Mandy.
Well, he did have a pretty good run, because, like, late 90s, Nick Cage was, like, Bringing Out the Dead, Leaving Las Vegas, very different to what a lot of people will probably know him for now. He was, you know, making quite serious films and working with Scorsese and writing as well. I think didn't he write as well, Leaving Las Vegas? So he was doing like some pretty heavy stuff. And then post this was when he kind of went mega Nick Cave, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean,
what are your favourites? Favourite films you love him, favourite films you love to hate him?
I genuinely don't know if I have any that I have actually disliked. I mean, that's amongst the reasons I love Nick Cage, is because the man is fearless. Like, in the best possible way. He will make a choice and he will stick with that choice. Even if it's the wrong choice, he will stick with it. And so it's always interesting. The film might be not great. The film is often not worthy of him and the heights he's trying to bring it to. But yeah, so you'll get stuff that is like ridiculously over the top, like Mandy or the sort of more insane moments of Ghost Rider. But then you'll have things like Joe or Adaptation, which are way quieter and more subtle, and you do go, you're like, there's genuine range in that man. He's not always at full volume, and it's the times where he's at full volume kind of give him almost the credibility to go quiet, and then you go, oh, good lord.
I actually, as much as I know, I'm not a big fan of it. I think he was great in Kick-Ass.
I was going to say Kick-Ass.
Because he just is exactly what Paul just said there. I feel like when he goes for something, he really goes for it. And I still think that even if bits of Kick-Ass have slipped out my brain since, the moment where he's putting on the eye makeup just kind of lingers. Mm-hmm. It's great, and he's just so Adam West the whole time. It's great.
Helen, where are you on Nick Cage?
It kind of very, very up and down. I'd probably say Wild at Heart is up there, Con Air, Face Off. And then, yeah, that's probably like my kind of peak limits. I'm trying to think of some other ones.
I think my favourite was probably Raising Arizona. Nick Cave. You said Cave before, Helen. Who's also a great, fantastic musician.
Don't get the two mixed up. You'll have a very strange experience. But he should do more comedy. I mean, he sort of does comedy. Does he do comedy? He sometimes...
Raising Arizona was, isn't it?
Yeah, so...
But that was like 80
ages ago.
Yeah.
I guess some would argue that The Wicker Man is probably a comedy, even though it was not intended.
I don't think it tried to be.
Yeah.
Also, Paul, what was the one we did do that we both loved to bits in the podcast and I can't remember the name of? Valley Girl.
Valley Girl, yeah.
Is he in Valley Girl?
Yeah, he's the main guy in Valley Girl. He's like, Valley Girl is so good, and he's great. It's like very early doors for him, and yeah, it's an absolute delight from beginning to end. It's the
cutest dating montage in a film ever, and it's got Nick Cage. You never would have thought. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. Dig out Valley Girl. If you haven't seen Valley Girl, give that a shot.
Because often people talk about him in Ridgemont High. Was that his first?
Yeah, it's amongst the first. I'm trying to remember, because there's I think Rumblefish was the same year as Valley Girl. Yeah, he had I think The Outsiders as well. He had this sort of little glut around about that sort of the very early 80s, where he was all doing a variation on the same type of character to a degree.
Yeah.
But then he kind of grew from there, because other directors would start to know that he did genuinely have range. He could do Raising Arizona, and he could do Rumblefish, and he could do Bringing Out the Dead, and he could do Peggy Sue Got Married. He's got a lot of strings on his bow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moonstruck's one of my favourite performances, which I think comes out of left field.
He's made a lot of films, hasn't he?
I love that Moonstruck is the type of film Nicolas Cage would look at and go, I'm going to channel silent movie acting through this, and it's going to be glorious. Again,
some of the line read choices I just think are splendid.
Yeah.
Should we talk about some of the other cast guys?
Yeah, sure.
Paul, anyway, who else do you want to pick up from?
Well, I mean, an easy one to go to is like Chris Cooper, because he's like a very beloved sort of character actor, has been for a long time, been in many, many things. But this was the one that, I mean, it was the one that got him his nomination and Oscar. And it's a really good shout for him. And again, demonstrating a kind of duality, but on a far more subtle level than Nicolas Cage in it, because obviously Nicolas Cage is playing two different characters, so he has a very open availability to play two different types. Cooper has to play a very discordant character as a single person, because he is someone who, when you look at him, you know, in the nicest possible way, you think hillbilly, because that's kind of what he's set up to look like. Someone who trudges through swamps. He's missing all his front teeth. He wears a cap and he talks with some sort of vaguely southern accent. But he is an incredibly intelligent, very, very erudite person who seeks trouble wherever he can find it and wherever guise he can find it. And a man of great passion for orchids and for fish, but he's also kind of typified by his ability to, at the drop of a hat and for no real discernible reason, just cut them out of his life completely. He will be all about fish, and then he just does not care about fish at all. In his words, fuck fish. And that just comes from nowhere. And again, that becomes part of why Susan Orlean finds him fascinating and why Charlie Kaufman finds him fascinating as someone who can be so passionate and so driven by a single purpose to then just drop it. Yeah, that's incredible stuff. And with him being so intelligent and he wants to flaunt his intelligence and show people how smart he is. But then if he meets someone who gets his references and knows exactly what he's talking about without him having to explain it, he becomes quite sort of churlish and a bit, well, I can't be talking about this all the time. Yeah, he's just, it's a really, really great character, and Cooper does really good with him.
Have you guys listened to the podcast S-Town?
I think I gave it a shot a long time ago, but I just wasn't really in the right headspace to deal with it.
Because, I mean, that's, when watching this again, listening to S-Town, I was like, oh shit, you're the main protagonist in the show, in the podcast. And I was also thinking, if this was done now, this would be a podcast following this one guy and his insane tricks. So Jenny, just listen to the first episode of S-Town and you'll definitely see the lineages and connections between him and character John B. McLemore, who's again singular in his intelligence, saying he's the smartest person that he knows, also causing havoc around himself. So yeah, just listen to the first episode and you'll see the parallels there greatly. Chris Cooper for me is one of the actors where I didn't really recognize him. He's a great character actor, but didn't really place him on the map until the Muppets. The John Siegel Muppets, and then every time I see him in a film, he's like American Beauty and this, I'm like, I know this guy. I've known him for ages. Of course, he's a great actor.
Maniacal laugh guy.
Yeah. Emma, any of the cast that you want to pick out?
I feel like the obvious one to jump to after that is probably Meryl Streep. I think she's one of these people, she's literally a chameleon. Like, I don't think she is a person. I think she's actually a chameleon. She just kind of becomes whatever she needs to be. And I think she's quite great in this as well, because there's something quite cold about her at points all the way through it. Like, she's kind of just in to do her job, but it's those little glimmers of maybe he says something that really resonates with her, or that she finds like something more in that maybe he didn't mean. Like, maybe if he's made some kind of throwaway comment about orchids, and in her head this is the most profound metaphor she's ever heard in her life, but it's probably just that need to find something for her to care about. But I think she was great in this. The point where, though, one of the garden centre workers tells her hair's really great, I instantly was like, this man's on a lot of drugs. This man's definitely on a lot of drugs. She has not conditioned to.
So many split ends, that hair. Like, it's just terrible. Like, I was thinking, is this for the film, or does she just need like a good haircut and some conditioning? But you're absolutely right. Like, she does more with kind of some of her facial expressions around her eyes than some people do in their entire career for acting. She's quite magical on screen. I think for me, seeing Judy Greer in anything is always great.
Yeah.
She just kind of brings something different, and I'd completely forgotten that Tilda Swinton was in this.
I love that they were the objects of his affections, so close but so far away. And I felt gutted that there's an orchid exhibition, and she's like, oh no.
You're creepy and weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of these things where until she turned around and was like, no, I was like, no fodder. Like, I was quite pleased when she decided he was a creep, because he was suitably being a creep.
Yeah. It's great that he has that kind of weird that sort of moment of realization within it. Like, he plays out this whole fantasy of them going to the orchid place and then just starting this, rather cute but sort of loving relationship. And then as soon as it's not even like he attempts to instigate that, but he just asks her to maybe go to the show. Instantly realizes what he's done, She goes and speaks to a manager, and he just sinks into himself because he remains a self-loathing individual.
And it's contrasting with, because it's what at the start of the film, at least, a fairly stable relationship with someone who seems to be super into him, yet he can't make that, he can't get out of himself to make that go to the next level by, it would seem, just giving her a kiss. Yeah. There's lots of interesting nuances and how Charlie Kaufman's played out. Has anyone actually seen an interview with him or heard what he's like in real life? How much of an exaggeration or real is this?
I've seen like the occasional interview with him. He's not necessarily someone who does it a whole lot. I feel like the most honest version of him is like he wrote a book recently called Antkind. That's him, because that is very sort of pointedly about the film industry and more, like film critics and the weird extended world that he lives in. He's not as schlubby as Nick Cage presents him as, but again, everything in the film is always being filtered through his perception. So his self-perception is someone who is so balding and fat and just so unattractive to everyone and can't do anything. Yeah, he's not that, but he thinks he's that, so he may as well be in a weird way.
Is there anything else you want to talk about, guys, before we head to the scores?
Do you know who I did love in this film and forgot he was in it till 2 minutes ago? Good old Brian Cox.
Yes.
Totally forgot he was in it, even though at the time when I was watching it, I was like, oh, Brian Cox. Great.
I was thinking Succession. Seriously.
Yeah.
Another person playing a real life character.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Robert McKee.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's a nice little nod towards this whole kind of notion of like how if the film is about adapting a book and he's got this constant idea of like how you do it, and the way to do it is to allow it to evolve properly and let it find its own way. And it's a very long and laborious process, but at the end of it, you'll have something good. But Robert McKee represents a more closed system that will make you write something quicker and more structured, but you might end up writing something that's more just pedestrian as a result because you're willing to sacrifice that individual thing from what you're adapting. But Brian Cox is a lot of fun. He's just an absolute blitzkrieg. He's great.
Let's head to the scores, guys.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have come from the worlds of film, television, music, food, comedy, and podcasting. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're gonna love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
So we also have a spreadsheet for our scoring. With our scores, they're all out of 5. You may have decimal places if you wish. And the first category is recommendability. So please, Paul, out of 5, how much would you recommend this film?
To someone like me, 5. To a normal person, 3.5, 4. Because it's really good. It's very enjoyable, but if you're not like me, it's often just annoyingly confusing.
So what are we going to go for?
I'll probably say 3.5. I can see this frustrating a normal person. But 5 if you're me. If you're me, it's 5.
I'm gonna like take note of the poll scores and then do some at the end.
An average of the scores.
Do some science.
Emma.
I can appreciate everything that was good about it. But I think I'd say maybe a 3. I feel like it's a film you should watch. It probably feels like having your vegetables with dinner, but I wanted a bit more ice cream.
Helen.
I absolutely love that.
Broccoli and ice cream, is that what you want? What?
If you eat your broccoli, you get your ice cream.
Okay, sure. Just checking.
I work with children. That's where this comes from.
Sorry, Helen.
God, it's such a weird one. There's so much that I've absolutely really, really, really love and find really fascinating. And then there's a bit where it switches and it becomes kind of like the thriller part of the film. And I'm less engaged in it. And I kind of want it to go back to like the weird brain melting thing it is. It's kind of a weird one, isn't it? Because it could go either way depending on how you recommend it to people. Because you go, well, do you like Nicolas Cage? And they say yes. And you go, well,
that doesn't help.
You should probably
Which
watch
version?
it. But they might like this kind of Nicolas Cage.
I know, but what's saying, well, for me, that doesn't help me recommend it more or less. It's like, that's Nicolas Cage. Sorry, carry on. It's your score.
It is. I will say that I think I like Kaufman best when he's not directing himself. I think he needs a separate director rather than when he's in charge. And I think the two that he did with Spike Jonze and then Michael Gondry with Eternal Sunshine are like top tier. And then I kind of go a little bit downhill. I think it's a little bit less, even though like being John Malkovich is completely absurd, it's a little bit easier to get. Once you kind of understand or get that there's a portal to go into, then you're like, okay, I'm kind of in there. Whereas this is a little bit trickier. But I do think it's kind of interesting. So I'm going to give it a solid 4.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4. I think there'll be lots of caveats because there are lots to take away. And I think if you stick with it, then you may not get it, but you'll be like, oh, okay, I see. Interesting. And I think for a lot of people, the thriller bit at the end will be a bit of a payoff because it then becomes a bit more normal in a way. Repeat viewing score, Paul.
I actually think this is like a really solid one for repeat viewings precisely because more of the texture and the layers and the weird circular references reveal themselves more to you the more you watch it. So if you are inclined to rewatch, again, I can totally see people watching this and going, never again, I've lost so much of my life already. But if you like it, you'll absolutely get more rewatching this. So yeah, 4.5. Actually, this is a really solid one to rewatch.
Emma,
I'm going to be fair and say a 4. I do totally think it's one of these films that the more you watch it, the more you get out of it. And I actually really love a film that does that. So a film where I know where the pieces are going, I really enjoy. Like The Prestige is one of my favourite films ever. So I'd probably give it a 4.
Helen.
So I've been faced with the possibility of rewatching it, but for some reason I've never gone, I must rewatch it. And I did really, really enjoy revisiting like the earlier bits, and it was kind of fun and interesting and made my brain feel strange. But I don't know how often I'm going to go back to it. So maybe a 3.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to. It's one of those things, I think like everyone said, it bears rewatching. You get more payout from it from a rewatch, but I can't think I'll be that bothered to watch it often. This is my second time round, and I remembered nothing from the first time. So I don't know if that leads into my engagement score. So I'm going to go for 2.8 here. Small screen score. Paul.
I mean, I've never actually seen it on anything other than a small screen. I discovered it on DVD. Kind of only ever watched it on DVD or Netflix or anything, so I never saw it in the cinema. And I don't think it really loses anything for having only been on a small screen for me. I don't think there's anything that requires the massive scale of a screen to really fully engage with the things it's talking about or that it's trying to do. If anything, the close quarters of your own kind of environment kind of are more closely to ape his perspective of just being so self-absorbed. So yeah, I actually think this is a really solid one to watch on a small screen. So 4. Yeah.
4. Emma.
I don't know, I still miss cinemas, so I feel like I would sit through like the remake of The Wicker Man right now on a big screen. So I think purely for all the kind of jungle sequences and stuff, I want that on a big screen. I watched it on my computer, obviously, because I can't go anywhere right now. So I'd get 3.5. I'd prefer to have seen it, but it didn't do me great injustice.
Helen.
Yeah, I'm with Paul on this one. I've seen it at the cinema, and I'm trying to think how I watched it since. I can't remember. So I've got one big screen and one small screen, and I I kind of enjoyed it on the small screen. I think there is something about that, because there's the voiceover, that you're in his head so much that sort of watching it at home, it feels like you're even more inside his head, because you're kind of like looking into like a smaller screen and you're almost inside his head type thing. So
being Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah. Like you're kind of like privy to his inside thoughts, and you're kind of like sitting in your home staring into the inside of his mind, and you're like absorbing his projections everywhere, because it's him and you in this small screen. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 5.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's a 5. If I'd seen it in the cinema, I don't think I would have got the most out of it from seeing it in the cinema, because I think it kind of needs that you sitting home, like glued to the TV kind of scenario. So 5 for a small screen score for me. Engagement score, Paul.
I love everything about this movie. like genuinely, I will give it exactly what I gave it in Letterboxd. It's 5. I love this movie.
Emma.
It's a 3. It's fine. Sorry, but it's fine.
What points did it lose you?
This is going to sound really bad. The beginning. I don't mean that it lost me altogether. It did bring me back. But I feel like at the beginning, I was just a bit like, oh. Whereas once car chases and alligators came into it, I was like, yeah, there we go. I can appreciate what's good about it, but it's fine.
Helen.
We kind of got like, it is that extreme of a film, I think. When it first came on, there was all the things about the plants and the things. I was like, what's going on and all this? And then when you kind of get to that point in the movie where he decides that he's going to start it with that, and your brain's like going, I'm like, that's a 5 engagement. But then when we get to the, hiding out in the swamp, I was a bit like, oh yeah, I remember now. I remember he gets like shot and stuff. I kind of remembered where this was going, and I kind of did like turning off the lights, getting ready to exit the room, sort of like just keeping an eye on the ticking it down. So how does that come out? 4.3.
I'm going to go for a 5 here. Because when you're in it, you have to be paying attention. And I think I'd rather just stop the film and say, okay, not right now, which is probably why my repeat viewing score is lower. But I think once you press play, I'm ready to go. A few cups of coffee, all the caffeine in the world, and paying attention. So 5 for engagement score, which gives us an overall score of 3.975. Higher than I thought it was going to be. Higher than I thought it was going to be. Let's head to Twitter. So everyone who listens to this podcast, do follow us on Twitter. We are at Flixwatcher Podcast. Follow us there because it's fun. And also because before every recording, we put out a little tweet such as this. We're reviewing Adaptation with Girl of Gotham and Paul Cinephile from the Yearbook Podcast. Have you seen this? Tell us your thoughts and your score out of 5 stars for an on-air shout-out on Flixwatcher. And we had 1 feedbacks. Paul, have you got your Twitch in front of you?
This movie is pretty good. I have not watched it in a while, but I would give it 3.5. I remember watching in theatres. And that comes from Flix X Raid.
Thank you, Flix X Raid. Pithy.
Can't remember it, but they still gave it a 3.5. That's pretty good.
Thank you for taking part. Paul and Emma, can you tell everyone who's listening where we can find you online and say goodbye?
Sure. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and I say Facebook, but we're only there sometimes. Yearbook Podcast. If you want to drop us an email, it's yearbookpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. And individually, I'm at Paul Cinephile, and you're at Girl of Gotham.
At Girl of Gotham.
Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.